This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. Brought to you by the Fort Hall School of Government, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 10th of March 2020 and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Star, Tuju broke 12 ribs, 3 vertebrae and injured his head.
Is there no more?
I was waiting
What a
for
headline.
In the Standard, the hands that rocked Kenya. And in the Daily Nation, handshake, peacemaker or con game.
Yes.
So the Star, as usual, a mouthful.
Oh my
Yes,
goodness.
yes,
Tuju
yes.
broke
And
12 ribs, 3 vertebrae, entered his head, went to London, came back, recovered. I mean, it's so much.
So, en route to Kabarak a few weeks ago, Tuju had this road accident, and the Star went to visit him. He came back a few days ago.
Yeah.
And in the interview, Tuju basically gave a breakdown of what happened. He basically broke 12 ribs, he crushed 3 vertebrae, he had neck and head injuries, he dislocated the knee. But he survived all that. He went to
Yes.
London for an operation. And then the story also recounts the 2003 episode, the accident that he and a few other cabinet ministers of the NARC government had, in which a minister by the name Mohammed Khalif passed on. And, you know, basically saying that Tuju is a
Lucky guy.
is a lucky man. He is loved by God. He himself acknowledges God really loves me.
Yeah.
And he's surviving. So
Yeah.
basically, I think he still has a mission to fulfill
Yes.
here on earth, and that's why he hasn't gone anywhere.
Exactly.
true.
And we wish him full recovery.
Full
Yeah,
recovery,
To the
indeed.
CS with out portfolio and our Jubilee Secretary General. Yeah.
Good story. We don't toss it, but we'll just park it. Just
we'll
park
park it.
By all means.
Well, we have a 3-part criteria that we're going to use to break down the headlines. We're going to ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
Yes.
So, people, we had a handshake anniversary yesterday. Isn't it? And people missed it.
All the dailies forgot.
Yeah, somebody was sleeping on the job.
Yes.
However, today the Daily Nation and the Standard have brought
Picked
us
up.
back to speed.
Yes.
So the handshake happened 2 years ago between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, and it has ostracized somebody. It has left someone out of the equation.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was very apparent over the weekend on
weekend,
Sunday
yeah. Yes.
when Raila and Uhuru went to watch a football game.
Yes.
And it was so clear these are now
Buddies.
the buddies. This is the bromance.
Yeah.
This is where the bromance is
That's
at.
Is that,
True.
yes. Yet the handshake was meant to end, animosity and political
Yes.
tension. Yet it seems to have almost heightened it.
Yeah, and that's what the Standard covers. So they talk about how that because of the handshake, opposition is dead.
Yeah.
But now we have the deputy president fast becoming the de facto opposition leader.
Yeah.
And then the most interesting part that was not part, it was part of the story, but I was on the headline,
Yeah.
was that we're having this thing between the system and the hustlers.
Yes.
So we've removed this thing of the dynasties. Now it is the system, and I think
Dynasty's
it was quite.
dead.
It was an interesting word to use because by the time you're saying system, you're saying that it's everyone in the political system. It's the establishment. It's the politicians, the bureaucrats.
Yeah.
It's no longer the elites.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very interesting way for them to kind of spin it.
Yes,
Yeah.
to spin
Yeah.
it. And can we ask ourselves, guys, is this strategy working? So yes, you've co-opted your enemy in the sense that Raila had become a thorn in Uhuru and Jubilee's side, and maybe he wouldn't have been able to accomplish much.
Yeah.
But is the strategy to make the deputy president feel left out and look isolated a good one? Is he gaining more popularity?
Exactly. Is it actually working to
Yeah.
isolate him?
Yes.
Or is it having the opposite unintended effect?
It's
Exactly.
having. I think it's having the opposite effect. In fact, if anything, now the resolution of Central Kenya constituents is hardening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Their resolution, their resolute support for William Ruto
Yeah.
is now hardening. They're
And
getting
stronger.
harder and harder in their stance. What I think politically, what the president should consider doing is to fast track this whole idea of creating a parliamentary, not a parliamentary, but a prime ministership,
Yeah.
a non-executive premiership.
Get
Yeah.
to it.
Because once you do that, then maybe you can incorporate Raila formally into government, and then he can do a dance between Ruto and Raila.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
Ruto and Raila can play their own games, and that way it won't be as divisive.
Exactly.
So does
but
it go
it's-
back to maybe this is all a big con game? I've been saying this for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe Uhuru and
you're right,
Ruto are
TJ.
in this together.
Exactly.
And come June after this, referendum when that might happen, they'll
Yeah.
just be like,
Yeah.
ha,
Yeah.
jokes on
Or,
you.
or maybe they're not even in it together, but circumstances will just compel
them
to end up backing Ruto.
Ruto again.
Another handshake.
For political expediency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Daily Nation does point out that the public rallies for BBI have come to a close, and they're supposed to come together, put together their recommendations,
Yes.
and then in June we are supposed to know the way forward. So by June, Uhuru and Raila should have told us what's
happening.
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All right.
BBI 2.
What do we think about the headlines?
I like the Daily Nation.
I agree.
Peacemaker or con game.
I still go with the Standard. Oh my goodness. Didn't even
Sorry.
give me a chance. Okay. All right, it's fine. It's fine.
Oh my God, so we have our winning headline from the Daily Nation. Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy?
What do we have in the nation?
In the Daily Nation.
In the Daily Nation, we have a caricature of Raila, a caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta, and they're shaking hands. And then we have a very sweaty, embattled deputy president with his gloves off, but he's still punching at the DCI punching bag. And he says, when the system takes out its frustrations on the system. Now, I think my understanding is that DP is supposed to be the system.
Part of the system, yeah.
But now he is also taking his same frustrations out
on the system.
And I think we can agree that the keyword in the next few months is going to be
system.
The system.
The system.
I took system to mean the deep state.
Yeah.
Is that the same kind of meaning you got?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
I saw deep state as an alternative to this dynasty conversation, that it's the establishment, that it's maybe
except
not
dynasty is very much more elite, but the
Exactly.
system has now incorporated all
everyone,
other actors. But it'll be an interesting debate to see how
Yeah.
people discern between deep state
and the system. That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do we think about the cartoon?
I think it's a good cartoon. Moreover, I think, showing Ruto punching the boxing bag without his gloves on, he's hurting himself.
I know, very frustrated.
Yeah, but DP is a frustrated man. We saw in the papers last week, DCI sort of pointing fingers very clearly and obviously in one
At
man's
him.
direction.
Yeah.
And over the weekend, DP said enough is enough.
Yeah. I saw some posts on Facebook saying that it looked like he was about to cry. I don't know how true that is, but
Tears
know
are
him.
always on hand. So
Yeah.
we
We'll
park
go.
it.
that.
Wouldn't be surprised.
In the Star, Ozone has taken us to the football pitch. And we have different teams: Simba versus Yanga, Gor Mahia versus AFC Leopards, Man United versus Man City. It's the derby weekend, so the football weekend. And then you have a caricature of William Ruto, and it says, his T-shirt says, "Ambitious Deputy versus the System."
Again.
A very big, fat-looking
system.
The reason I like this cartoon is because it shows the extent, the vastness of the system.
Yeah.
The system is the entire, the formal apparatus of government, plus the people with money, plus all the means to
achieving,
to do violence and so on and so forth. And I really do wonder when I look at this cartoon whether the deputy president has a chance. Against
he's
all
drawn.
of
We
that.
have
going
very
up against the
small.
government.
That's true.
Not very easy.
He might die trying.
It is a good
Absolutely.
cartoon. Yeah.
God forbid, though.
I think
Not that kind of death.
Yeah.
Not that kind Whoops.
I say we park
Political deaths,
Okay,
people.
qualify it. All right. Standard.
Okay, so Gado has taken us to the upcoming Olympics in Japan. So we have a man with a torch, the Olympic torch, running. And hot on his heels is the COVID-19 virus, the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And I think here is just, there's been doubts about whether
the Olympics will actually take place.
And usually the torch goes from country to country.
Oh,
but
that's
there's
a
been
good
nobody.
point.
Yeah, there's been usually
Carlos
not
onto
that.
something.
I wouldn't want to
Very
travel.
nice.
Yeah, and so
the
people
whole of
are
Italy is on lockdown.
on
The entire
lockdown.
nation.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's about 60-something million people who are not allowed to move.
Yeah. So I think clever, but I don't know if I want to give it to Gado.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think so
Yeah.
either. Can we just toss that? What do we think about
All right.
the other two? I know JM is
I like the one of the football.
the football one.
And I like the punching bag one. So you tag.
Okay. So because I threw the standard when JM was not ready with the headlines, I will award him, even though I don't understand it.
The Star.
The Star.
There you have it. The Star gives us our winning cartoon.
Yes.
What is our final thought?
And now our final thought, inspired by a book entitled The Emperor of All Maladies, a biography of cancer, written by Siddharth Mukherjee in 2010. I'm going to stumble.
Mukherjee,
thank you. I'm going to stumble on that. So Mukherjee is a cancer researcher and physician who gives a very brilliant and thorough examination of the history of cancer, while also explaining it in such a way that any layperson can really understand its origins and the battle to treat it, prevent it, and cure it. So he's a scientist and a physician, and he calls this book a biography of cancer rather than simply just a history. And the author explores a wide range of research, historical accounts, and personal stories in an intensive look at the backstory of cancer. So it actually took him 10 years to complete this book, and it was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for the detection and treatment of cancer as a book that covered that history. And it was later selected by both the New York Times and Times Magazine as one of the top 10 books of the year. And I think it's specifically because it resonates with everybody. You can read it so easily.
Yeah.
So he embarked on an ambitious effort to write a biography of the disease from the earliest evidence of its existence in ancient Egypt to the modern attempts at deciphering this cancer gene. So his coverage begins in 2500 BC all the way up to 2009. So he gives an objective view and historical facts about cancer in its various forms. And he says that this is becoming the #1 cause of death in the world. And I think in Kenya we also see that. But to do so in this book, Siddharth says more than once that it is necessary to go back to the genesis of the disease to find the cause when focusing on a cure that seems so unsuccessful. So the majority of the book focuses on leukemia as one of the strains of cancer, but the book also discusses how and why many researchers had to go back to the beginning to try and understand cancer in order to find a cure. And so he says in the beginning of the book, to begin, every biographer must confront the birth of his subject. So he asks, where was cancer born? How old is cancer? Who was the first to record it as an illness? And so he says that the first recorded evidence of cancer comes from medical literature back in Egypt in 2500 BC by a physician called Imhotep, who describes a case of breast cancer. And in regard to a treatment, he says very sadly, simply there is none, because he says cancer is a human body battling itself. But over the centuries, Mukherjee says that cancer seems to have become this competitive disease. And he's aware that as cancer cases escalate, the ability to find a cure has not been able to keep up with the pace of this escalation. And so he says, in an effort to make the subject more alive and therefore more understandable, he said that he wanted to write about someone, not something. So a lot of the book is riddled with stories of his patients, giving their stories about how they either succumbed to cancer or were able to go into remission and survive. So it's a very interesting book where he's able to take you through the stories of actual people.
Yes, very touching book.
It is.
So in one of the parts, he talks about how 1 in 3 women and 1 in 2 men will have cancer at some point in their lifetime. That means
These are global statistics.
Yes, so that means every one of us will either get cancer or know someone very close to us who will probably get it. But it's interesting, he also talks about how a quarter of all American deaths, so 15% of, a quarter of all American deaths are due to cancer, and 15% of all deaths are also worldwide are also due to cancer.
In fact, some of the figures say 1 in every 11 deaths in Kenya is due to cancer.
Wow. Yeah, so it's pretty prevalent. And so there was a hypothesis in the book that civilization caused cancer, and he says that the link is correct, but the causality isn't. And he says that civilization did not cause cancer, but by extending our human lives and curing other diseases, it unveiled cancer. So there are 3 factors that explain this. 1, cancer is an age-related disease. So mutations accumulated in our cells grow exponentially as we age. So the probability of cancer also goes up as we have aged, right? So by extending human lives, we have also unveiled
because we're living a lot longer.
Exactly. And then the second thing he says that by reducing the deaths from other infections, so malaria, TB, and others, we've elevated the status of cancer compared to these other diseases. So we've become better at curing TB and malaria and not so great at curing cancer. So it's taken on this status. And the third thing is that civilization has exposed us to increased carcinogens, pollution, smoke, radiation, and all these other things. And that's what caused its proliferation. So in part 6 of the book, he talks about the triumph of research. So basically that no one labored in vain, no human labored in vain. And these were the fruits of long endeavors. And here he talks about how there's been an actual decline in the cancer mortality. And so he says for nearly every major form of cancer, from lung, breast, colon, and prostate, mortality has declined by about 1% every year, which doesn't look like much, but cumulatively it's been it's pretty big. And the rate might sound modest, but if you look at between 1990 and 2005, they say that cancer-specific death rates dropped by nearly 15%.
Wow.
So that decline apparently is unprecedented for any other disease.
Those are facts that people should know.
Yeah, in the history of disease. So he still calls this the empire of cancer because it's still very vast and very complex. But he says that there's been a decline for a multitude of reasons. One, the driver of, for instance, lung cancer was primarily political and inventive litigation. So it became not so cool to smoke. It became harder for you to smoke in certain areas. And also there was counter marketing. So anti-tobacco adverts showing you why you shouldn't smoke. For colon and cervical cancer, the decline came due to prevention. We've become better at screening. And so screening and better use of chemotherapy. So we're not using the very aggressive ways of curing cancer, but we're trying to moderate the chemotherapy as well. And so but then he says that this research and these victories have actually come off research that was done in the 50s and the 60s. So here lies a problem. You have a situation where we've become very good. We have biological clarity on what cancer is, how it replicates and what it does. But we have a medical stagnation
on how to solve
it. So medicine is not
catching up
and keeping abreast. So it was very interesting, quite dreary, but...
But he writes a lot like Malcolm Gladwell, so I found it was an enjoyable read.
Exactly.
Quite a long book, though.
Yeah.
In one of the chapters, he talks about the hallmarks of cancer.
Yeah.
And he says that in the year January 2000, two doctors, one by the name Robert Weinberg and Douglas Hanhan, published an article titled The Hallmarks of Cancer to summarize the rules governing the biological characteristics of tumors. And that, until then, had been believed to be almost impossible due to the core behavior of more than 100 distinct types and subtypes of tumors. So doctors had said, this is really hard to narrow down what the least common denominators are across the board in terms of what these tumors are, the cancer tumors. And so there's six primary characteristics which basically break down what it means to have cancer or how cancer operates in our bodies. So the first is self-sufficiency in growth signals. And these two authors say cancer cells acquire an autonomous drive to proliferate by virtue of the activation of what is called oncogenes. Those are genes which in certain circumstances can transform a cell into a tumor cell. So from a normal cell to a tumor cell.
And I think that word onco comes from, I think it's the Greek or Latin for swelling. And that's why you have an oncologist, which is the study, or oncology, which is the study of cancer.
Yes, precisely, those cells. Number two, insensitivity to anti-growth signals. Cancer cells inactivate tumor suppressor genes. And those suppressor genes are the ones which will normally inhibit the growth of the cells which are abnormal. Number three, evasion of programmed cell death. Cancer cells suppress and inactivate genes and pathways that normally enable cells to die. So your body has a way of killing certain cells, but cancer comes away to the cancer cells come away to do away with that. Number four, limitless replicative potential. And here they say cancer cells activate specific gene pathways that render them immortal even after generations of growth. So they continue to just live on in your body. So, number five, sustained angiogenesis. Cancer cells acquire the capacity to draw out their own supply of blood and blood vessels. And that's also what makes them really, really dangerous. That they
and aggressive on the body.
They are kind of finding a way of sustaining themselves within your body. Finding a way to get blood within your body. And then number six, finally, tissue invasion. Cancer cells acquire the capacity to migrate to other organs, invade other tissues, and colonize these organs, resulting in their spread throughout the entire body. So basically, cancer is, this.
It's a difficult disease.
Very, very difficult, very complex disease.
And there's one thing he highlights in the book, how it might be one thing in your body and another thing in my body, and that's precisely why cures are so hard to find.
Precisely. And when you look at these six factors here, they probably are an indication of why we still have not been able to get this kind of medicine that stems
It is
this.
necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on a day where we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from the Star, I want to leave you with this. Cancer begins and ends with people. In the midst of scientific abstraction, it's sometimes possible to forget this one basic fact, that it's people who are affected by it, right? But we can only find solace when we demystify things, and the process of understanding is the first step. So let's first understand.
Yes, that's true.
So please subscribe to our YouTube channel, but also find us on TV. We're on Pang Free to Air, Go TV, and Star Times. Have a good evening.